This video interview it will be with Alec Katarski and his wife Willie, both of whom during the Second World War, 1942 to 1945, were prisoners of the Japanese. I'll just clarify that slightly, because the expression to use for Willie is that she was a civilian internee. They were incarcerated initially on Java, and of course they did not know each other at that stage, and their stories are quite different. I now propose to commence the interview with speaking with Willie, and then we'll talk about Alec. But prior to that, I will show an image of the map of Java, including generally Southeast Asia, to give you an idea of the locations they were in. And also, as part of the introduction, I will show you some embroidery which was done in Willie's internment camps on Java. Thank you. Over to them now. The locations which will be mentioned during these interviews, of course, this is Singapore, this is Java Island, and to the west there is Sumatra. Jakarta, the main port of Java, is there. Bandung, the POW camp, is central Java there, and Surabaya over here is one of the other locations mentioned. Just pause. Now, the areas of interest for this account of POW's experience are Java itself, Java Island there, Timor over here, the Celebes, Borneo, Malaya, and Thailand, including Bangkok in that location. During the interview with Willie, she will show you some embroidery, but since the interview which I did with her, she has provided me with some other embroidery, and this is in Jihapit camp, all in Dutch, 23rd of August 2603. Well, that date is lost on me. I've been unable to convert it, but I'm sure it's 1943. And on here you'll see down in this corner Willie's name. I'm just going to push it up into the centre screen. There it is. And on there's some little images, embroidered names of some of her colleagues. There's some spectacles here, flags in each corner, a sort of dressing table affair here, a clock, and a set of playing cards. I'll just pause while and this is a separate piece of embroidery dated about 4 months later, the 5th of December, and Willie's name is there. I'll just stretch this out a little bit. There's Willie, and names of her friends are embroidered over the surface of this piece of embroidery, which I'll call, for want of a better term, a handkerchief. I'm just going to be showing some books which are relevant to the experiences of these women and children of the Netherlands East Indies and the Japanese. Hell Came Twice by Sonia Schultz, Song of Survival, and this was the basis of the book Paradise Road, and excuse me with my pronunciation, Helen Collins. Prisoners of the East, Alana Corbin. The Way of a Boy by Ernst Hillen, and this one I find particularly good, The Forgotten Ones, Women and Children Under Nippon by Shirley Huey. And just to finish off, there are 3 books which I'll mention which are relevant to the nurses. Well known, White Coolies by Betty Jeffries, While History Passed, Jessie Simmons, and Portrait of a Nurse by Pat Darling, who on my website I have a video interview with, recorded 3 or 4 years ago, around 2007 or 2008. sorry, Willie. We were talking about Sylvia, weren't we? Okay. Willie, thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview today. And we're ostensibly going to cover your experience whilst you were a guest or incarcerated with the Japanese.
Okay.
So can you tell me where you were born and what year you were born?
I was born in Semarang in the year 1921.
Yes, and where were you educated?
In Bandung.
In Bandung,
Yeah.
but over on Java?
Yeah.
Right. And did your parents decide that you should further your education?
I went to Holland.
Okay.
To further.
And
Yeah.
and did you go there on your own?
No, it's my sister, my
Yeah.
eldest sister.
So what year do you think you...
39.
1939.
1939.
And what did you go to study?
Domestic science.
Right.
Science, domestic science.
Yes.
To teach at cooking and that sort of thing.
Yes. And what did your sister study?
She worked for the external affairs. She
Yes.
went to a school for typing.
Yes, yes, as a stenographer.
She had a fantastic job
Yes.
all over the world.
Yeah. Now what I didn't ask you is what was your name when you were a single lady?
When I what?
When you were a girl, what was your name?
Oh, you can't remember. Groenewoud.
Yes.
Groenewoud.
Right. And your Christian names or given names?
Wilhelmina Catharina.
Right, thank you. So you are in Holland. Now an event occurred which necessitated your return to the Netherlands East Indies. What was that?
In 1940 we left by the last boat and the Johan de Witt back to Indonesia because my parents called us back. That was the last phone call that came through.
Yes.
But we had a lot of trouble finding my sister was living in Amsterdam and I was living in Haarlem.
Yes.
So, but we found her, but very often we had to go in the, because the airplanes came over, the Germans.
The Germans were bombing, were they?
Yeah.
Mm.
So we at last we got to the boat but we weren't allowed to go because my uncle paid the money, but if you didn't have any money,
Yes.
you couldn't go. There were only 300 people on the boat.
Yes.
And the whole trip we traveled with
Blackout.
blackout,
Mm.
and we were not allowed actually to go to sleep. We had to wear the vests.
The life
and,
vests.
and also with eating and everything.
Yes, yes.
But I sometimes took it off because otherwise you couldn't sleep.
Yeah. Now, when you got back to the Netherlands East Indies, which port did you arrive at?
In Jakarta.
In Jakarta.
Yeah.
And you just went back with your
My
family?
parents were waiting there, and
Yes.
we went back to Bandung.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, do you recall when the Japanese invaded?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was your father in the Dutch army?
Oh no.
No.
He was in civil, not an engineer. He was for checking houses for whether they were built the proper
Like
way and
a building inspector.
Building inspector. So,
Yeah. Yes. So he hadn't been called up or anything. It was just
Not yet.
no.
But he was called up too.
Yes. Yeah.
And my brother was called up, but we were all in different camps.
Yes.
My brother was called up when he was 10 years old.
Yes.
They took him from the streets.
Yes.
Actually.
So in your family there was
Four
yours
children.
4 children.
Three sisters and one my brother.
Your brother. Yeah. Now, when the Japanese invaded, where did your father? What happened to your father?
My father was in Bandung.
Yes.
They took him away from Bandung,
Yes.
and we went.
Did you see him?
I was in Surabaya actually
Yes.
when the war broke out, but I went back to Bandung,
Yes.
and and then we went into camp actually,
Yes.
Chihapit,
Yes.
and Chihapit we were for about a year, I think.
So you were there, just your mother and
two sisters.
the 4 children. Where's your brother gone?
Oh, they picked him up from the street into another camp.
Yeah, so how old was he when he was
10.
taken away? He was 10. And usually they only took them away when they were 12, but...
Yeah, but
he
we
went
had
with-
a lot of 12s in camp.
Yes,
But,
yes.
he was very young.
So there was the three sisters and your mother.
Yeah.
What sort of accommodation did you live in that camp?
It happened we had a house with 5 rooms and with 5 families, so we each had bed, sitting room,
Yes.
and 1 kitchen, of course. But we were not allowed. We were allowed to cook in the beginning, but later on we were not allowed to cook anymore.
Yes, yeah.
So there was one lady that they found out that she used gas, and she had to walk through the camp with that gas thing
Yes.
around her neck.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So in this time, where did you get the food from? Did the Japanese give it to you, or?
Oh no, well we had the kitchens.
Yes.
Soup, we got soup and not much actually, and rice.
Yes.
But actually I saw a lot of people taking rice home from the kitchen for
Yes.
the family, so
Yeah.
I did that too. I had a big pocket here.
Yes.
I took some home for my mother.
Yeah, okay. Now,
My mother had very bad asthma, but in camp she never had any trouble actually.
yes. So, did you have beds?
No,
No.
we were in an army camp actually.
Yes. And you slept on the floor?
No, there used to be mattresses, but we slept on just on the, what do you call it, the frame that was there
Yes.
built for the...
Oh, only
for
the frame
army.
with no mattress?
No.
Yeah, it must have been very hard.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah. Did they try and have school for you young people?
No.
How did you feel in the day?
Not at all.
What happened there?
Oh, we had to work for the Japs and reading and writing out recipes.
Yes.
That
yeah.
was the thing, and at night time when we went to bed, the only thing we talked about was about recipes or something to eat.
Yes, yeah. Now, where's that apron that you showed me?
I put them in that room, on the desk,
Okay.
in the computer room,
Right, yeah.
right in front of you.
Now, this is very interesting. I'm so glad you showed me this. Can you
I've got a
explain?
hanky, but I can't find the hanky.
Yeah, can you explain what that is, and can you hold it up so that we can see it on?
This is for a hanky sachet that you
Yep.
that put with all the names on it.
And these are all the people who are
People from the kitchen.
in the kitchen with
From the
you.
kitchen that we were
Yeah.
in the kitchen with.
Now, what did you use this
For hankies.
for hankies?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's beautifully done. Who did the embroidery?
I don't know, one of the girls in camp.
Now, what's this particular item
That is,
that you...
well, that is to put stockings in or hankies or whatever you've got, little things.
Yes.
And we all got the name on it.
And you
so
put
we-
your name on it?
Yeah.
I think I've got that in the camera. Yes, I
I've
have.
got the hanky, but I can't find the hanky also with all the names on it.
So, you never saw your father again till the war was over? Never saw your brother till
He
the
was
war?
waiting in Bandung after the war for us.
Yes.
But we were not allowed to go.
Yes.
We went to Bangkok. We stayed in Bangkok for 6 months.
Yeah, isn't that incredible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there was so much shooting after the war in Semarang where we were,
Yes.
that there was a boat that we could go on.
Yes.
And for my mother, we went on that boat to Holland.
Yes.
And we went to Bangkok
Yes.
for 6 months.
Yes. Yeah.
That's where my youngest sister met her husband,
Yes. Yeah.
and we had a fantastic time there.
Yeah. Now, you were saying how you went to Bangkok, but the reason why you went there was because the
Because
Indonesian people
We shoot it.
were rebelling against the presence of the colonial Dutch.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
putting it correctly?
Well, my last camp was actually the worst part. we slept with 28 people in one room on the floor.
Yes.
And we had some clothes underneath our heads
For a pillow.
as a pillow.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Indonesian people came and they blew that stuff from a yellow flower into the room.
Mm.
And so nobody woke up. Everybody was asleep and they pinched the clothes from under our heads.
Yes, yes. Now, when you were in Bangkok, what sort of accommodation were you in?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
A room like in a motel,
Yes.
the Oriental Hotel.
And who was funding that? Was the Dutch government?
Oh,
or?
we didn't have to pay it.
So then you moved back to Holland, did you? And did you...
To a place from... We all stayed, all the 6 of us, is my auntie.
Yeah, yeah. And there was the same auntie that lent you the money to send you back...
Her brother,
yes.
my father's brother.
Yes, yeah. Now, what did you do? Did you start work? Did you have a job back in Holland?
I started work.
Yeah, what work were you doing?
I worked as a secretary for the Ministry for War, or whatever you call it.
Yes. So you're a typist? Did you do shorthand as well?
Yeah, I learned it, but I didn't do much up there.
Now tell me, when did you meet Alec, or Oleg?
In Holland, in Amsterdam.
Yeah, what year?
In...
Roughly?
We got probably 47 or 48. We got engaged on 49.
Yes.
So it must have been about 47.
Yes. And I mean, it was interesting. I think he was telling me that he knew your sister.
Yeah. He knew my whole family.
But he didn't know you.
And I knew his brother.
Yes.
But I didn't know him.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got a picture of your wedding. I will try and I'll try and put that into this video. It's at the end of it.
Yeah.
But it's a lovely picture. But if people are interested, they can see it on my website anyway.
Well, oh, I see.
Yeah. So when did you and Alec got married in
Amsterdam?
In Amsterdam and lived in Holland.
Yeah.
How long did you live there before you decided to come to?
We went to we got married in 49, and then he got a job in Indonesia in the Celebes. So we went up there, but then the war broke out. The Indonesians were terrible there. They were standing in front of our house, throwing us with stones.
Yes.
So we wanted to leave.
Yes.
And that's when we actually went back to Holland. No, we came here, sorry.
Came here?
51. We stayed there for about a year, and then we came here.
Now, what was life like when you came to Western Australia?
Well, we arrived here, and Alec's brother was living here.
Yes.
But we stayed with him only a very short while, and everything was... The door didn't close, and you know how it was in that time. You could leave everything outside.
Yes, yes.
But I don't know how many times we walked the streets because we didn't have any money to find a place.
Yeah, so what work was Alec doing at the time?
Nothing at the moment. He couldn't get a job.
Couldn't get a job, no.
So we went around the streets, and once we were in Kings Park Road, and there was a young couple, they were going on the honeymoon, and they said, you can have our room for a week.
Oh, how about that?
We did. And then we also walked on the Canning Highway, Albany Highway. There was a delicatessen, and we asked them whether we could put it in the window that we were looking for something.
Yes.
And they said, well, you can have our room, and then we'll go in the bed, in the sleep up.
Really?
That was very nice.
And whereabouts in Albany? Was that in Victoria Park?
Kennington.
Oh, I think
Albany Highway.
Further out in Kennington, yes, yeah. It was a nice gesture, wasn't it?
Very nice.
So, after the war, did you work at any time yourself?
Not here.
No? No. And what sort of work did Alec do?
He started with an electrical. Mr. Cloaks was the boss then. And after that, he got into the car business. Yes,
was he with Hortons, was he?
He started with City Motors.
Oh, City Motors in the city, yes.
Yeah. Then I think he he got himself the job. They didn't want to say anything, and Alex said, if you can't make up your mind, I'll make it up for you.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's the job he got.
Now,
And then from City Motors he went to Linus,
Yes.
and from Linus he went to Titan.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, he's also been at Hortons.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, how many children did you have?
PV.
Yes. How many?
The two boys, Michael and Bart.
And Bart. And do they live in Perth?
No, Bart lives in Karata,
Yes.
and Michael lives in Perth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose, can you tell me, this is probably difficult for you, in the time that you were incarcerated with the Japanese, what might have been the worst thing you saw or experienced?
Well, I know for one thing that often we were waiting at night, 12 o'clock, for something to eat. They got out, it's finished.
Yes.
We didn't get anything.
No. No. Yeah, that must have been hard. And did you find that there were any Japs that you felt were not quite so bad?
Pretty good ones.
Yeah.
In Jap, we had, we still could get out,
Yes.
but there was a very nasty one. So we got out, and then we thought, well, we'll come back the other way, because but then the nasty one was standing on that side,
Yes.
and we came in.
Yes.
But we with the 4 or 5 families we had to put down.
Yes.
I'm still, there's only me and one other girl alive.
Yes.
Everything has passed.
Yes.
Everybody's passed
Yeah.
away.
Yeah. Well, Willie, can I say this, that it's been an absolute privilege to be able to, well, to have met you over the years,
Thank you,
but
Peter.
today to do the interview with you. And I'll stop now and then we'll do one with Alec.
Thank you very much.
Well, Alec, we've just had an interview with your delightful wife, Willie, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And now I want to talk with you about your experiences as a prisoner of war. And if you're happy, I will lead the questions to you.
Sure.
So if you can tell me where and when you were born.
I was born on the 28th of January 1923
And you were born on Timor Island.
on Timor Island.
And you were born in the hospital at Kopeng, was it?
Kupang.
Kopeng, yeah. Now, obviously you grew up there. When did your family shift across to Java itself?
I would say I was about 4.
And now your father performed a deed for which Queen Wilhelmina granted Dutch citizenship to your entire family.
Yes.
And there was reason for that because your mother and father were from White Russia. Is that correct?
Correct.
What was the incident that the Queen Wilhelmina decided that your family were justly to become Dutch citizens?
My father was working for the Department of Volcanoes,
Yes.
and my father was sent to the Merapi volcano, which is in central Java, and it was not, as they call it, asleep.
No, it wasn't dormant.
It wasn't dormant.
So it was erupting, was it?
It was erupting.
Yes.
And it caused quite a bit of damage to the native villages around the feet of the volcano. My my father went up and decided that the best place was on the top of the volcano, so that he could study and keep watch on the volcano.
And watching for the lava flow, was he, at the time?
Correct.
Mm.
When he took the temperatures and all the things that would alert him to the fact that the volcano was about to erupt, and during that work he notified the local villagers that they are in a difficult position or a good position, or whatever the future logically would be. Whilst he was there was another eruption of the volcano, and he was able to notify the various Indonesian villages to either move or stay put.
Yes, yeah. And in return for what he did, saving many lives,
there were quite a few lives saved that way. And when the Dutch government between the 1930s and the 1935-36 made possible the move of their living quarters, etc. The Dutch government did send him thank you from the government to my father for being able to rescue so many of the citizens on the bottom of the volcano.
Yeah, and for that they conferred Dutch citizenship on the entire family.
No, we had applied to become Dutch citizens.
Yes.
But that sped
the process up.
The
application.
Yes.
So, when the Japanese invaded Southeast Asia,
yes.
What age were you when you were you called up into the army, or did you?
Called up in the army.
What age were you when you were called up?
17.
Yes.
17 years old. I spent some years as a recruit.
Yeah, yeah.
With the Dutch Army.
Yes. Yeah. So do you remember the Japanese when they invaded Java and that the bombing occurred?
Yes,
and that sort of thing?
I was sent to the Central Java,
Mm-hmm.
To deliver General Motors trucks,
Yep.
which were built by General Motors in Central Java to the various army units.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I first experienced the Japanese as enemies in the field.
Yes. Now, was there an occasion when you were going down? I'm not quite confident about my pronunciation, but I'll say Tillajap. You were going to Tillajap, and what were you going there for?
The various groups of foreign armies which had occupied as assistance to the Dutch army.
Yes.
In Central Java were all moving to Cilacap.
Yep.
As the last harbour between Indonesia and Australia.
And some people were hoping to escape through there.
And there's some people who saw the hopelessness of the situation were moving towards Cilacap.
Yes. I might just stop there for a moment. Now, I'll just have to backtrack a little bit, Alec.
Yes.
The when you had been captured by the Japanese, you'd been down to the south coast to Tillajap, where there was maybe the possibility of escaping to Australia,
Yes.
but you then became under the Japanese control at that location. Then you spent about 8 months in Java generally.
Yes.
Which were you in Bandung or anywhere in particular that you can recall while you were there?
I was in Bandung in new part of the army barracks. And when the Japanese came, we were given, we had to parade, and we were given certain orders regarding our movement and our stay within the confined spaces of the army barrack. We were, if I remember, we were given 3 meals, 2 or 3 meals a day. And we were told that we would be shot if we left the confines of the prison camp.
Yep. Now you were there for you were in Java for about 8 months, and then
Correct.
you were shifted to Singapore. You were there for a couple of weeks.
Correct.
And from Singapore you then were put on a train and taken by train over about a 5-day journey to Thailand,
Correct.
arriving at a place called Ban Pong.
Ban Pong.
Now from Ban Pong, the Japs want to send you to work on the Burma-Thailand Railway. How did they transport you?
We were transported for the most part by open trucks.
Did they give you any medicals at any time? Did they check your medicals?
No medicals.
No? How often did you have food?
About 3 times a day.
And how was that done? Did you carry food with you?
Officially 3 times a day, but in actual fact 2 times a day.
Yeah. And now, what of your personal effects did you still have with you? Did you have a haversack with you or anything like that?
We mostly had a haversack, which in our stay in camp we had added to various medicines that we could find, and anything we thought would be handy, although in a lot of stops we were checked, our goods were checked, and
Now, you went through as far as Rintin, is that right? Or did you went to Tarso first? Does that ring a bell?
Tarso, yes, Tarso, and
maybe I should do that in order. From Ban Pong, probably the main place was Kanchanaburi.
yes,
Did you stop there overnight, or did you just keep going?
I don't remember.
No, that's fair enough. It's a long time ago. And Tarsau, I don't. That's probably the pronunciation.
Tarso was the further on.
Yes, further along. Yes.
And wasn't as far as where
You ultimately went to.
where we settled in our camp.
So do you remember?
Although the place where we finally stopped, in which we called our camp,
Yes.
wasn't actually a camp or anything. It was just a bit of lighter bush, and we were told that was our camp.
Yeah. So you had to clear it, did you? Did you? Did you have carry any tentage with you?
we had no tentage. The first night, I think, we slept under the skies, and by then we had some rough cover.
Yes. So you built huts, did you, with the ADAP roof?
A little bit.
Yeah.
No, ADAP wasn't available.
No. Well, what did they have on the top to keep the rain off?
Just a few branches which we had broken off the trees.
So when you initially arrived there, it wasn't the rainy season, was it?
Well, I would say it was about December, January. Must have been.
Yeah, well, no, you didn't go till Singapore till January, so this is probably February, March or something like that.
No. We were in Singapore for maybe two days or 3 days.
Yes, so that was in January 43.
Then we took a week
to get up there. Yeah. Okay, now I follow what you're saying. So you've gone up the line, you've established your camp, and it must have been further north than a place called, if I mentioned Kinsaok, does that name ring a bell?
Yes.
So you were further north than that?
We were just a bit further north.
Yes.
In Kinsaok we met Australians who had been through the same movement.
Yes.
They also came from Java, and we were together.
That was probably a portion of Dunlop Party.
Correct. And there was no food the first day, but then the next day it was a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. Now I understand you establish a camp, and we won't go into the detail, but you had to dink these big, deep trench latrines so that you had them to use.
Yes.
Was your camp close to the river at all?
Yes. It was. The river was one of the campsites was the river.
Yes. So did you actually go and bathe in the river? Was that how you kept yourself clean?
Not directly, because the Japanese forbade any bathing in the river.
Were there any streams through your camp so you could wash in the streams or anything?
We could wash there.
Yeah.
But, no swimming.
No. Okay.
Later on, it was a little bit easier.
Yeah. Now, what work did you do in that area? What towards building this railway for the Japs?
In that area, we just helped finish off building the camp until we had about 4 bamboo camps, bamboo huts. And although quite a few people slept just wherever they could.
In the open, yeah. Now, would you like to have a little rest?
Pardon?
Would you like to stop for a little while, have a little rest?
No, I'll try.
Okay. Now, did you have Dr. Brass with you at this stage?
Yes.
He was in your camp with you.
Brass was in our camp.
That must have been a bonus having him there.
It was, because he was calm. He now and then tried a joke. He was helpful, and he was definitely a good member of the camp.
And what about, did you have Padre Hamel with you?
Hamel was there. Padre Hamel was virtually our Allied commander.
Was he? Yeah.
And then we were taken in small groups up the track along the river and back. It was the direction in which we were supposed to move further.
Yes.
And Japanese sort of told whoever was in charge from our group what our future job was going to be.
Yes, yeah.
And the next few days we were called to on parade and were taken to various spots along the track which went along the river to cut away small trees, etc.
So you were clearing the railway trace.
The railway
trace.
And in fact, the railway tracks, yes, they were there,
but you were just cutting the timber down to create the space for the railway to go through. And in some cases you were building embankments, you told me.
Yes.
So tell me, what did you do when you were building an embankment? How did you do that?
Oh, just shovel earth together.
Yes.
That's it.
And did you have to work in teams, loading baskets with soil and carting it up, and tipping it off? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we worked with elephants.
Yes.
The elephants were a great help, especially for removing small trees in one hit. And they had tie the people that looked after the animals were Thailanders.
Yes.
And but they didn't mix with us.
No. Yeah. Now, when did you actually see the railways, like sleepers put down and the tracks laid in the area that you were in?
Oh yes.
And did you actually see any steam trains go up that, or at any time?
Only later on.
Towards the end, yeah. Now, How was your health while you were up in that area?
Our health was still all right,
Yeah.
because we hadn't arrived at Thailand so long,
Yes.
and malaria, etc., hadn't reached us.
Mm.
When I say reached us, we hadn't been touched by the illness yet.
Well, I think you were at an advantage. If you compare your position with the Brits and Australians, you'd grown up in Netherlands, East Indies, where malaria was, so you knew all about the precautions
Yes,
to take.
we knew, as far as that was concerned, we knew, although the Australians knew a lot more about those things, because their mode of living in the British colonies first was different to the mode of living that the Dutch had.
Yes, quite different. Mm.
And they went down much, the change was much greater than the Dutch had.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. Now, you at some stage were moved back down south when the railway was finished. You were moved back down south, somewhere near the bridge over the River Kwai, I imagine.
Correct.
And there was one occasion when you were to be shifted to a hospital camp at Chong Kai. Well, maybe if I can tell you what this is something you told me some time ago, that you'd been unwell, you and a lot of others were to be shifted to this hospital camp, and you were carried by one of your mates down beside the train, and you were standing beside the train, you were going to be shifted on the train, and one of the Japs came along and said, "You stand, you walk."
Yes.
Now, can you tell us what happened, what you did when you moved from that location?
That was much later.
Yes.
We weren't, at this stage, we were looking virtually after ourselves, simply because no one else had reached that place to live. None of the other prisoners had been that far. The prisoners that were with us.
Well, what I'm really getting at, I really wanted you to describe for us when they wouldn't allow you to travel to this location on the train. As I understand it, you had to crawl for about 6 kilometres along the railway track, going from sleeper to sleeper.
Yes.
Have I got? Is that right?
At a later date, correct.
Yes.
And that sleeper to sleeper was simply a method of looking where you were.
Yeah, and keeping off the ballast.
Of the ballast.
Yeah, yeah. Now, eventually somehow it is decided you're going to become part of the Japanese party.
Yes.
And I think it's fortunate for you that Padre Hamel and Dr. Brass ended up being in the same party.
Correct.
Now, you were shifted from Thailand back down to Singapore by train again.
That was much later.
Much later, yes.
We were first we were taken to the camp where the Australians were, which was
At Tamakan, was it?
Kinsale.
Oh, so you came back to Kinsaok, yes?
Kinsale.
Mm.
And we got certain things from the Japanese, because apparently what we didn't know was that the trains could go as far past our camp.
Mm.
And they brought certain things to the camp.
Mm-hmm.
We went to the nearest camp where the Australians were in charge. And we occasionally saw them.
Yep. I'll just...
Swimming was forbidden, but we watched as good as we could the water that was running through the jungle,
Streams.
got water out of the river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, Alec, we just had a little break, and just want to get to the point where you moved through to Japan, but I'm aware that from Thailand you moved by train back to Singapore.
Yes.
And went into River Valley Road Camp, and then you went on a vessel to Japan.
Yes.
Do you remember the name of that vessel at all?
Just came to me, and it's
Yes.
RME.
ARAMI.
Yeah.
Yes,
One
yeah.
of the Three Musketeers.
That's right, yeah. And it was a very fast trip. You know, it was one of the
Very
faster
fast
trips.
trip.
You know, you were up there in about 14 days.
They had torpedoed a few earlier ships.
Yes. Now, were there Japanese on the vessel as well as POWs?
Oh yes.
And did they have better accommodation than you guys did?
They had all the luxury.
Mm.
And one bloke asked me what I was doing, and I lied to him. I said something. I forget what I called myself some very influential bloke, and I don't know what he thought. But,
Now, when you arrived in Japan, you arrived at the port of Moji,
Moji,
Yeah.
correct, yes.
and then from there, did you go by train down to
By train.
Umuta Camp 17?
Umuta, yes.
Umuta Camp 17.
And it was, although it was a train trip, it was fantastic the way that train drove.
It was the best transport you had, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there were already a lot of Americans in Umuta Camp 17, weren't there?
Oh yes.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about the Americans, and in particular, there was a Commander Little, I think, in charge,
Little,
and a Warrant Officer Benito.
Yes, and there was about, what did you say, the name?
Little? And Benito?
Yeah, Little was a naval officer.
Yes.
American naval officer. And he was virtually the camp commandant.
Yes.
The American camp commandant.
Now,
And he tried to get us out of the camp. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I realized vaguely, but it didn't mean very much to me that he could get rid of. But he was a man that could get rid of us by faking some sort of and tell the Japanese, and the Japanese would have shot us. That was the type of bloke he was.
yeah, I understood that the Americans in the camp were almost politically divided between Democrats and Republicans. Correct. And one was in charge and the other group were really oppressed.
Yes.
Now there was also some doctors, Prompf and Hewlett. Do you remember them at all? No. But your Dr. Brass?
The trouble was, for me, was no trouble.
Yeah.
But I was never in a group direct.
Yeah.
I was like one of the lucky ones that got.
Right. Carry on.
I was one of the lucky ones that. What are we talking about?
Well, we were talking about how the Americans, one group of Americans, controlled the camp.
Yes.
Well, that's my understanding anyway.
And he did, and there were some very nice people, most Americans.
Yes.
Not that I befriended one American and about 1, 2, 3 Americans. It was the first time.
Go on.
Nothing to do with these people. Nothing to do with these people that I knew. But I had never heard of what do you call it? Male sex.
Oh, homosexuality.
Homosexuality. I had vaguely heard about it, but it wasn't particularly interesting to me. And there, for the first time in my life, I met people who were in that position.
Yeah. Oh well, that's life. Now, what work were the Japanese forcing you to do when you were in Amuta Camp 17?
In Amuta Camp 17, I started off doing odd jobs, either with a group that were shoveling
Keep going. What you were doing. Keep talking, Alec. You were saying what work you were doing there.
And I was sent back to the coal mine, and the Aussies and the Americans had people that knew how to operate in a coal mine or in a mine, and they used explosives, etc. And what I wanted to say.
Maybe could I ask a question? I know that the coal mine was virtually under the sea level, but how far down were you working when you were in these?
About 100, between 100 and 200 meter.
Yes.
Underground.
Yeah. And how long did you go down in a lift?
We went down not in a lift, in a sort of a train.
Yes.
It went down the hill and it went back.
And it was on a cable, was it, or?
I would think it was on a cable.
Yeah. Now, could I ask you? This is a picture out of Roy Whitecross's book, and he was in the same camp as you. Does that depict the area like where you were working?
What these are, they were called kobokos.
Yeah, can I just put that in front of the camera? Now, I'll just have to lift it up, sorry. No, we're not doing too well. Oh, okay, I can see it now. Those beams?
Beams were called kobokos.
Yes.
And they suffered a lot from the pressure of the ceiling onto the dam.
Yep.
And our job was to replace those kobokos with fresh ones.
Yeah. They're like supports.
Like support.
Mm.
And the little wagons which eventually got the ore out, or whatever they were getting out,
Coal.
were electric machines with a cable that went right down in between the rails that they had through the corridors of the mine. And I started and stopped the machine.
Oh, right.
And my job was to start and stop it. And the Americans, especially the people that did handled the explosives, were close to me, of course, because they exploded it, and I then got the wagons to get
load the coal onto.
Pardon?
You loaded the coal onto the wagons, did you? Alec, was there always that amount of headroom, or was sometimes the area very shallow?
Very narrow.
Yeah.
I slept in the mine under, he could just take my head. And fortunately this was the end of the wall and there was a corridor. But I couldn't put my head in the corridor because people were walking and I wasn't supposed to sleep. So I slept there, but just under the outer rim of the wall. And the Japanese that walked past, they didn't see, they just looked in the, they didn't look.
Well, they only had it the same as you did. You had a torch on your head.
In fact, it wasn't. It wasn't normal that people would be asleep there.
No.
And I slept part of the time. And later on, I was moved. The Japanese probably saw that I was clumsy. For my own reasons. So I worked the machine.
From the surface?
No, from there at the end of the line. And I stopped and started the machine.
Yes.
And of course when I started it, everyone had to use their shovels to shovel the thing in the middle. And then start the machine, and it took all the stuff that the shovels threw there outside so that they could check and that they had the good stuff.
Yes. Now, I did mention to you about an Australian by the name of David Runge.
Yes.
Who, and I'll just summarise what happened to him. He had been down in the coal mine, and this is my understanding, he said to some of his mates, don't work so hard. The Japs heard him, took him up top, put him in front of the guardhouse, and forced him to kneel for 3 days with a log behind his knees. The log, of course, interfered with the circulation of the blood to his lower legs and his feet. Added to that, he was in the snow, and when after 3 days he was carried back to the hospital hut,
I remember that.
His feet had to be amputated by the Australian doctor, Dr. Ian Duncan.
Yes.
Now, did you tell me that you knew him and you did speak with David Runge?
I did, before he had difficulty. There's a film that shows Camp 17, but where I've seen that I don't know. Part of Camp 17. And he was one of the, he was a young bloke. Because I was young. I was 21 or 23, and this bloke was smaller than me, and he looked younger than me.
Did he? Yes. Do you remember him when he had his legs amputated?
No, it didn't.
No. You never saw him carried around the camp?
Oh yes, I've seen him in the camp, but and I heard that he was that his legs were amputated, but I haven't seen him since.
I'm just going to put this in front of the camera there is a picture of David Runge on his arrival back in Australia, and as you can see he's got 2 artificial limbs, and he has a Japanese samurai sword in his hand which he souvenired from the Japanese, and this is out of a book written by John Towers, who is also in the same camp. Yeah, that's what I was showing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that was.
Now, do you remember anything of the atomic bomb being dropped on
Yes.
Nagasaki?
Yes, I was topside,
Mm.
and we had just finished loading a wagon with coal dust when there was Air Force alarm, a bomber alarm,
Bombing raid or something like that?
bombing raid,
Mm.
and we saw the American planes fly over. We were standing next to the wagons. We saw the planes going in the direction of the big town
Nagasaki.
Nagasaki, when suddenly we saw puffs going up, different colors, and a flame right through the smoke. And we reckoned that they must have hit a weapons factory,
Yes. Yeah.
and that was it.
Yes. Yeah.
And later on we went into Nagasaki and saw the damage.
And what was your impression of the damage?
There was nothing there, nothing left in as one whole piece.
Mm, mm.
Steel poles were molten halfway,
Mm.
and of the houses there was just a bit of sand in different shapes, but there was nothing left.
Can I just go back, when you saw the atomic bomb dropped and the mushroom, was there ever a huge wind blast that came across the camp?
No, we were too far away.
Yes.
There
yeah.
was, first of all, there was sea
Yes.
between bits of the island and another island,
Yes.
and we were too far away. I would think that we were roughly 20 kilometers, or maybe even more.
Yes. Yeah.
But because it was so enormous, it looked a lot closer. I did later on go past the damage and saw these houses or certain buildings were looked still intact, whilst others just didn't exist. It was, but it didn't mean very much to me.
No, no.
Simply because, as far as my mind and brain is concerned, it was the end of everything.
Now, the war's now over. When did you first know that the war was over? Did the Japs call everyone on parade and tell you?
No, the American let us know. I believe, but this is only my own thoughts. I believe that they notified the people below by throwing some either banner or something which had written on them that the war was over. Because we all contemplated that, that will be extra job tomorrow, cleaning up, etc. Fortunately, it never came.
No. So the war's over. Who were the first people repatriated from the camp to go to their home country?
The Americans.
Yeah, they were very early, weren't they?
Yes. But we went not very far behind them. We arrived, we were told, you are leaving tomorrow, you'll be going to Okinawa, because the airfields that are usual for our planes are in Okinawa.
So were you all Dutch people that were told that, or
no? I cottoned on to an Australian, I don't even know his name now, and we were taken by ship. We were put on a ship, and it took us about 2 days or something like it to reach Okinawa. And in the meantime, whilst we were still on the ship, the Yanks had told us, choose a ship. Well, I poked my finger at the smaller ship, because with my prisoner mentality, I thought on a smaller ship I might not have to work so hard and the food might be better. Anyway, we arrived in Manila. We arrived in Okinawa. It had 7 airfields and had a direct contact with Manila. We were in Okinawa, and from Okinawa we were put in a plane. We actually went to the place where the big aeroplanes were standing, and the bloke that we saw in and around the plane said, "What do you want?" And we said, "We want to go home. We are ex-prisoners of war and we want to go home." Obviously he thought that we were Americans and wanted to go back to America, but anyway, we told him we were ex-prisoners. He said, I'm leaving tomorrow morning. You can come, it's an empty plane. So we didn't know that was a lie. He knew what we were or anything. Next, I don't remember whether it was morning or just a few hours later, he said, all right, get in. We all got in the plane and the plane left. But I looked out of the window and I saw in front of us another plane, and in front of that plane another plane, and another plane, and another. Anyway, we arrived. It took a few hours to arrive in the Philippines. We were told not to get out until we were told to. Trucks appeared. We were put in the back of the trucks and driven to the welcome building at the edge of the airfield, and from there it was these newspapers, hail all returning heroes. It was just fantastic.
Did they issue you with new clothing or anything like that? Or had you already got that?
No, nothing.
No?
And nothing yet.
No.
And just 1 second.
This, I presume, is in Manila, is it? In the Philippines?
Yeah, in the Philippines, in Manila. And we might have been issued before when we were, although I don't think so. But because what you took off your body, you threw down, it was brand new stuff, and you put on fresh clothes.
Yes.
Given you, and you walked away from. In Manila, we didn't stop in Manila itself. There was a motor camp outside Manila, but I would think about 10-20 miles. And that's where we were. We got an American sergeant. He was a sergeant. And he told us what to do. And we had meals there, fantastic meals. And I had been doing something and I missed the meal. So I said, what do I do now? They said, go to the kitchen and just ask them whether they've got anything left. So I went to the kitchen and I said, you got any left? He said, yeah, and there's big aluminium colanders full of chickens. The chickens came from cooked chickens from San Francisco because the local chickens were too small. We really made pigs of ourselves.
Yes, yeah.
And then we were taken to a camp with that sergeant, and he was a camp sergeant, and he told us if there was anything going on. For the rest, he just left us. to ourselves. It was a fairy story. And then we had a Dutchman in high military rank arrived from Holland to tell us that we had suffered and all this type of thing, and we walked out of there, and we went to the American camp and stayed there, and one day we were told to get ready, pack our stuff in our kit bags. We were going to the Dutch East Indies, and so we went to the harbour, and there were ships, aircraft carrier was there, took us to Balikpapan in Borneo, where there were Australians. They gave us their rifles, and we were, what's going on? Are we back in the army? Yes, you are. You've got to take over their duties. And we said, we're not particularly interested in doing those duties. They said, well, the same punishments, etc., that are normal in the army are there, you've got to... And we were sent to Balikpapan.
Yes.
In Borneo. And there were Japanese groups in Borneo. There were Japanese on the little islands in front of the coast. Nothing particular happened, but we used a few swear words for the Dutch army, but that was that, and I got a good job because I was the driver of the commander of that group, and he'd seen a Jeep for the first time.
Yes.
He fell in love with it, and that was his Jeep, and I had to watch it. I had to drive it to him, and he drove it from there on. No one else was driving it. And he was a little short bloke. He looked after the forests in his normal job. He was a forester.
Where?
In Borneo. And but he was now a military captain. And as long as I sat on his jeep and looked after it, I got a job with a friend of mine who is now dying here in Perth. He's in the hospital. He knew more about cars than I did, so I immediately got him, went to the captain and said, I know someone who knows motor cars very well. He could help me. Okay. transfer him, and he joined me, and we had the job in the morning of driving 30 kilometers, I don't know, not very far, but to the airport. It was a real jungle airport, Borneo, planes, army planes, bombers, etc. From Java flew to that particular landing area and dropped the mail off. So every morning our job was to go all those kilometers, pick up the mail and return.
And where did you go to after?
And then from there I was sent to the islands south and east of the Philippines, and that was a Dutch army station, and I was back in the army, and all the others too. No one, we had our own doctors, the same doctors that we had before.
Oh, you had Dr. Brass with you, did you?
Dr. Brass. I don't know, I've seen him only once there. He might have been transferred. The Padre
Hamel.
was an American. He was still with us. He was from Dutch origins, but he was an American Padre.
So that's Hamel, is it?
Pardon?
Hamel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were back to normal army work, patrols, etc. Fortunately, I had as my job picking up of the mail in the morning, and any special jobs that occurred. And I had my friend with me, he was my co-driver. Although very often the officers that came with us, it was the first time they saw American jeeps, etc. They wanted to try them out. So I was the armed guide rather than the driver.
Now, how long was it before you were discharged from the army, and where were you discharged?
I was only temporarily discharged. I went to Jakarta and reported there in the army, and I was told that oh yes, I had the choice of going back to Holland or stay in wherever I was. And I said I want to go back to Holland. My mother was in Jakarta in a hospital. I had to go to Jakarta, so I saw my mother in the hospital. And I went to the mail boat, which had all the women and children, etc., that were being taken back to Holland. And my mother was going to come on another boat. and I had to work. I had to bring the food to the women on board that ship and all sorts of things. When I arrived in Holland, they said, where's your wife and kids? I said, I have no wife and kids, I'm here to look after these. And anyway, they said, remember you're still in the army. Anyway, I said, well, my family is coming over. And they said, okay, where do you want to go? Which town? So I said, I have a town in Holland, near Amsterdam. I arrived there and it was a little something like this. And the lady said, where's your wife and kids? I said, I'm sorry, they're still coming. But I didn't tell her I wasn't even married. And they said, you can have this, etc. Anyway, the next day I thought I'd tell them the truth. I said, no, my mother is in Jakarta coming here, but I don't know when, and I'm not married. So they said, all right, you can sleep on a chair in the corridor, and that was it. And we weren't treated that good. They said, well, we suffered during the war from the Germans. I said, yeah, but do I have to suffer now, whilst we were free and the war's over? Oh, well, don't ask us, we're in the same boat. Anyway.
So what date is this, roughly?
This is, I would say the war was over in maybe June or
August 45.
August 45. This was about April
of 46.
46.
All right. So when did you actually take your discharge? What date were you discharged? And did they pay you right the way through?
No. They paid for the place, the rent for the place, but that was it.
You didn't get any pay from the Dutch government. So what date were you actually just officially discharged from the Dutch army?
I would say I've got mine somewhere, but I would think about 6 months after.
Yeah, so 1946, yeah, first half of 1946. Yeah. Now tell me, how did you meet Willie?
I was settled in Holland. I was booked into the university as a student, which I had done just before the war. When I finished high school, I put in for the university in Amsterdam.
Yep.
And of course nothing happened. And I was going to go and start, and I did start university, but I thought learning would be very easy.
Yes.
But my brain just wanted other things.
Yeah.
And it was still expensive. The university was expensive. I couldn't pay for it. And I had an auntie, well, she wasn't a real auntie, but she knew me from, she was friends of my parents from before the war. And I knew her well. She was a Dutch lady, and she was very kind. And she organized that I could get a place to sleep. But it wasn't it wasn't a very happy existence. The university very soon, I couldn't pay for certain things anymore, and although I did finally get a monthly government help, it was just enough to eat and sleep. And for the rest I had to count on either Dutch relatives or friends to make a living.
Now, back to the question, when did you meet, how did you meet Willie?
I met, I was in Holland, and my mother finally arrived in Holland from Australia, where she was evacuated to. She had a good time in Australia, and she gave a few lessons at the Perth University in French, but she finally came to Holland. I rented a upstairs set of rooms, and I moved in with my mother. My brother, in the meantime, was brought back from Timor, where he had some mishap with his leg, and but he finished up. He was an artist. He finished up working for a firm set up by artists to carry on. Then I met a group of younger friends who hadn't been in the army and hadn't been through what I had been through. And obviously they had settled parents, etc. So it was a very good friendship for me. However, I couldn't go on like that, but anyway, they introduced me to their brothers and sisters, etc. And one day, one of them said, one of my sisters is coming. And I said, well, I know one of your sisters, or two of your sisters, but one was in a parallel class to myself, and the other one was an older girl, which I occasionally had seen, but I didn't know her very well. And they said, our sister is, he said, my sister is coming tonight. I said, well, let's go to a dancing place and meet her that way. He said, yeah, that's a good idea. And I was introduced to Willie. And after that, I took her out myself once or twice. And then her parents arrived back in Holland, and she obviously moved to be with her parents. And I fell in love with her.
Lovely, yeah. And when did you get married? What year?
When did we get married? Well,
Yeah.
when did we get married?
The 28th of April 1949.
28th of April 1949.
Thank you. And that was in Holland, was it?
In Holland.
Yes,
Yeah.
Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And we went to the Master of
In the registry office, Peter.
Right, thank you, Willie. And then when did you make up your mind to migrate to Australia?
Well, my mother came from Australia. The last time she was away. And my brother was still in Australia working for an advertising company. And I got a job offered by a Dutch import and export company in Indonesia. And we were virtually engaged, so we decided we get married because they paid for the movement of your wife and everything. So we got married and left for Jakarta. From Jakarta I got transferred to from Jakarta we got transferred to from Jakarta
Yeah.
we got transferred to
Is this before the war or after the war?
after the war. We were married, we just got married.
Oh, Makassar. The
To
Celibate.
Makassar. In the Philippines.
In the Celebes, yeah? Celebes.
And I could take my wife.
Yes, yeah.
The company paid for us staying there, and then I got transferred to Java
Yeah, Jakarta.
and in Jakarta, and things looked a little bit grim for our future. So I went to the Australian consul and said, my brother is still in Australia, My mother was there, but she sent to Holland. I explained the conditions and the statement. I'm not used to Holland. I'm more used to Australian ideas, etc.
Well, we actually came because your brother
That's right.
divorced, and he had a little boy of 2 years old.
Yes.
So he thought that we can get
can
together, and
help
that's
him.
how we came up, and we are not sorry.
No,
We love it.
excellent,
We love it.
excellent. Yeah.
So,
So there we are. We've got you in Australia, and
not only that, the Australian government was a lot more kind to ex-soldiers than they were to
the Dutch were. Then the Dutch government was.
and I got here. There was no question when I said I was an ex-soldier, etc., to come to Australia, and then later on I thought I'm still fit. I'll join the temporary unit of
The Citizen Military Forces.
citizen military forces,
Yeah.
and through the citizen military forces I got to know a lot more people,
Yeah.
and
I think we've only got 90 seconds left on the tape now. So-
I was finally I finished up as a major in the Australian Army,
In the Intelligence Corps.
in the Intelligence
Yeah.
Corps.
Yes. Well, can I say I appreciate a great deal to your generosity and Willie's generosity in allowing me to do this recording today, and I will burn a copy of it and send it to you.
Thank you very much.
During the interview with Alec and Willie, I mentioned an image of their wedding day, and this is the photograph of their wedding which took place in Holland. And now this is the roll from Muta Camp 17, where a fellow who I interviewed, Roy Whitecross, was one of the clerks, and he had this roll of the 1,992 prisoners who were in that camp, and here you can see is Alex. I think he must be, I don't quite know which number is his, but also this is all the Dutch that were in, many of the Dutch that were in this camp. And during the interview with Alec, he has made mention of Padre Hamel and Dr. Brass, who were in the Muta Camp 17 with him and had come from the Netherlands East Indies at some stage. Also, as you know, Muta Camp 17 was, that's got shine on it, thank you, this is a bit difficult to do, but there we are, there's Nagasaki. Muta Camp 17 was in about 100 kilometres away from Nagasaki, which the bomb, the second bomb was dropped on, and this is a picture of the devastation that took place in that area. Now we'll just clear the things away, and just recently when I was interviewing Willie and Alec, they showed me some commemorative medallions which were presented to them to commemorate 60 years since the end of the war. And that concludes the recording of the experiences of Willie and Alec, and it has been my privilege to be associated with them.